Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you, and welcome to today's full council meeting, and welcome to members of the public who are attending in the next room or watching this meeting via the YouTube channel. For those in the room, I'll just remind you of the safety information that I announced earlier. I won't repeat it because we were all here. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence, and I've received apologies from Councillors Ali, Cheney, Goggin, Hornchin, Jama, Mack and Wilcox. I don't believe we have any other apologies. No. Okay, thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Can I ask please whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? None. Excellent. Agenda item 4 then, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of May 2021 as the correct record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Galandris. And can I take it that those minutes are agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Those are agreed. Item 5 is Lord Mayor's business, and today I have none, so we move straight to item 6, public forum. We have 30 minutes for public forum, and details of all of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on the website and via the modern.gov app. Those members of the public who've submitted public forum statements, questions or petitions and wish to speak are in the council chamber behind me watching this meeting on a screen. And we appreciate this is not ideal, but it's due obviously to the capacity of this room and the COVID rules that we're dealing with. So I'll go through the list of those who've indicated that they wish to speak, and ask people to come into the room, speak at the lectern, and then leave out of the double doors at the side to allow a one-way system. And Democratic Services staff will assist with that. And we'll start first with the public petitions. We've received one petition to this meeting, and I believe that Luke Geach is here to speak to us about that petition around access to public toilets for bus drivers. Luke, welcome to full council.
Thank you.
You have 1 minute to address us on your petition.
Good afternoon, councillors. I hope you've taken the time to read the petition statement and fully understand why the petition has been submitted. The lack of adequate, clean and hygienic toilet and washing facilities for bus drivers, as well as other operatives, is a national disgrace. It is a matter that affects thousands of drivers, and it is time for all interested parties to recognise this fact and address the problem once and for all. For years, drivers have avoided drinking water during the day, relieving themselves into bottles or on the street, and even wet themselves. The problem is especially hard on pregnant and older drivers, those with bladder or bowel conditions, and for people taking diuretic medication. One laboratory study found that not responding to the extreme urge to urinate affected the attention and thinking as much as staying awake for 24 hours. Bus drivers are especially limited by logistical constraints. According to a recent survey, 82% of drivers disclose they regularly hold it in while they are on the job. A study in 2019 by the Royal Society of Public Health discovered that 20% of the UK
Luke, can you start to wind up if you could, please?
Sorry.
Can you wind up if you could, please?
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Put off venturing out of their homes as often as they would like due to not having adequate access to toilet facilities when out and about, rising to 43% people with conditions requiring frequent toilet use. RSPH have phrased this a loo leash. On behalf of thousands of bus drivers across the country, I respectfully request your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and the petition will be referred to the Mayor for consideration. We move on to public statements. A total of 9 public statements has been received, the list of which is on the screen now. 6 members of the public have indicated that they wish to speak. I'll run through those in order. And again, I'll invite each person to come in and speak to the statement for 1 minute. Please bear in mind, if you're speaking, that all of the statements have been published and read by councillors. So please try and summarise within your 1 minute in order that everyone gets a chance to speak. So the first statement we have is a representative from Bristol Send. Alliance speaking about Send. No, they're not here. Okay, in which case, can we move on to Jen Smith? Jen, welcome to full council. You have 1 minute to make your statement.
Thank you. Marvin Rees told Bristol Media in response to a question about disability access and the central skate stops that it's about trying to manage a public space to make sure it's as accessible to as many people and as welcoming to as many people as possible. But this is disability discrimination. You cannot have one rule apply to everyone accessing a space when applying barriers. By deliberately placing metal rods sticking out of the pavement, you are creating physical barriers for disabled people that may either hurt them or keep them out. Disability discrimination continues to pervade Bristol through education, workplaces, services and public spaces. The council is currently recruiting for an unpaid chair for the new Disability Equality Commission, a high-level strategic role, but again, disabled people are expected to give up their time and expertise for free. To apply to be chair, those doing so must justify their application to Marvin Rees, the same person discriminating against disabled people by approving of metal barriers on pavements in public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. And we'll move on now to public statement number 8. I believe Penny Gain from Bristol Women's Commission. Penny, welcome to full council. You've got 1 minute to make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you. We're once again urging the council to support a nil cap for sexual entertainment venues in Bristol. SEVs profit from and contribute to gender inequality, and the council should not be sanctioning this. Women's organisations supporting survivors of sexual and domestic violence agree with us, and so do the majority of the citizens panel who were asked the question. There are established links between SEVs, sexual objectification of women, and gender-based violence. We are asking you to keep an open mind, not be influenced by the loudest voices in the press or on Twitter, but to take decisions based on research, evidence, expert testimonial, and what residents and communities of Bristol want. Any women directly affected by a nil cap should of course be supported to find more work, but this isn't about employment. It's about changing the behaviours of men and boys. A nil cap on SEVs won't solve this problem on its own, but it will be a significant step towards doing so. Bristol should take this step to make the city a fairer, safer place for all women and girls.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public statements of those who are here to speak, although, of course, all of the public statements have been read and noted. We move on now to public questions, and we're going to start with Dan Gira, public questions numbers 15 and 16. Dan, well, welcome to full council. What we'll do is ask you to read out your questions first. The Mayor will give you a verbal answer, and you're then entitled to one follow-up question for each of the questions that you've asked.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Since the ecological emergency that was announced in February 2020, what percentage of additional land managed by the council has now been dedicated for the management and provision of services for wildlife?
So it's quite hard to say that at the moment because in many ways, as I shared earlier on, working out the metrics to measure the progress we are making, not just as an authority, but as a city, is a challenge. But it's work that is underway to make sure we know whether we are or not, and the extent to which we are being successful in meeting the challenges that have been set for us with our city partners. That's something that we want to know as a political leadership, and it's something we know the city need to know. But in terms of the current context at the moment, 24% of the land that we own is protected from development and committed for wildlife under any of 3 designations. And I'll share them with you now. Sites of nature conservation interest, sites of special scientific interest, and local nature reserves. Again, one of the things that makes it challenging is it's then hard to also add in the work that we do managing wildlife corridors, rivers, riverbanks, scrublands, and verges as well. So it blurs the boundaries a bit, but nonetheless, this is a challenge we've asked the teams to take on. Yeah, if I leave it there and then you can come back with any supplementaries you want.
Great, thank you for your response. I work in conservation, and just to enlighten everyone here, and I don't want to patronise, but for ecological restoration, we need everything connected up, and therefore, regardless of the size, we need scale and we need action now. So what I'd like to just ask in follow-up is, how are you attempting to monitor that progress, and will the public be aware of that progress as it happens?
Well, again, that's one of the complications, isn't it? Because it's not just total surface area that we set aside, it's the connectivity between those different areas. So for example, one of the corridors we look at is the river, going right from with the whole range from inland nature areas to coastal areas, and how we protect the riverbanks. That's all part of our consideration within the ecological strategies mentioned within it as well. So we are absolutely looking not just at individual plots of land, but also how they're connected for nature corridors, as well. And as part of the strategy, which will be being developed with the Environment Board and the groups involved therein, again, it's not just council land, it's city land. We're looking at front gardens, encouraging people not to be tarmacking and the rest of it. I'd also say there was a phrasing in the question that we often come across that we have to take seriously, is that having a commitment to restoration of the protection and restoration and recovery of nature is not an anti-development position. Right? We still have 13,000 people on the waiting list, and it is absolutely clear, we had this discussion at the Environment Board, that what this is not, which I was sometimes getting communications on now, is this is not an anti-housing strategy. What we have to do is work out how we build the city that the people of Bristol need in a way that actually supports nature and integrates nature, as well as decarbonising the systems, around it as well. So if we look at a scheme like Bonington Walk, which is net gain biodiversity, really important. We're looking at green walls around the city as well, but that takes money and resource that we mentioned earlier on.
Great, thank you very much. And do I have time for a second question? Great, and just to follow up around lenient management, and it does tie into what your response was there.
Sorry, lenient management.
Lenient management, so instead of overcutting.
You've had one follow up to your first question. We need to move on to your second question now, which I think.
And my second was just again, what's the additional reduction in the use of pesticides, namely glyphosate, on the areas managed by the council?
Yeah, and I'd say that there's an open door to have a conversation with Nicola Beach about this, who's my new cabinet lead specifically for climate, ecology, waste, and energy. And this is one of so within the ecological strategy that we've committed to a 50% reduction by 2030. That, again, that's not just across the council, it's across the whole range of organisations that manage land within Bristol, and huge bits of land, as well. And I would say the important thing within that is that the ecological strategy was not just written by the council. So it's important not to call it the councils. It was, 5 or 6 organisations here when we launched it. But I've asked Nicola to commit to going beyond 50% reduction by 2030, reduction by more and by sooner as well. What is practically manageable within that? We'll find out, but that's the task that she has. You'd be welcome to get in touch with her about it.
Great, thank you. And just to comment, there's lots of local groups that do want to help, so do get in touch. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Okay, we move on to public question 21 on clean air zone implementation. And Nigel Shipley, please.
21.
Nigel, welcome to full council. If you first of all ask your questions to the mayor, you'll get a response, and then you can ask a follow-up.
Thank you. I'm here representing Our Air, Our City. And my question is, why has the implementation of the clean air zone been delayed for another year?
I said to one of your councillors earlier on, it's really important that we are careful in the way we describe the current situation. We've gone through a few years in which there's been a fair amount of loose language, I think, about delays and missed targets and so forth, and that's not what's happened. So the important thing is about the date of compliance, reaching compliance in the shortest possible time. That is absolutely the same. But the situation we're in at the moment is, having submitted our outline business case to JACU, we're now in the conversation around how we support the transition of people into the clean air zone without avoidable negative consequences for some groups, like hospital visits. We've put up the low wage threshold from 24,000 to 26,000 as well to help low income people. We've asked for additional money for businesses and households to support their own transition for vehicles as well. With those mitigations having been submitted to government, JACU have now come back to us and said, actually, we want more time to talk with you about how we make those real, so we can support a just transition. That's what's led to the later date of implementation, but the date of compliance has not changed.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
My follow-up question is that last April, the CBI published a report, Breathing Life into Bristol, and in that they described the outcome of a survey of what they believed were the outcome of the small clean air zone. And they said that it would save only 20 lives. So my question is, what other measures would the council take to save the remaining 280 lives lost each year from our dirty air?
Well, we do all sorts of things to try and improve health life chances. If you read Michael Marmot's report from 2010, Fair Society, Healthy Lives, which is all about how we tackle long-term health inequalities, which is been Scanton talking about before. You've got to get every child to the best possible start in life, build physical resilience into their very personhood, good quality homes, good quality nutrition, early doors, so they're not additionally vulnerable to poor air quality and the health toll it can take. I'd also say that we're building into our future design of the city. And again, we would really welcome more people who are concerned about air quality speaking into some of the actual difficult challenges that we have. We're a city of 460,000 people. We're going to be 550,000 by the middle of this century. We have to house those people. If we can build homes in central city locations, then we are increasing our ability to build homes without the need for people to have private cars. We're building them in zones where people can engage in active travel. And while we have often been lobbied on clean air, what we have not had is people coming forward with the additional supporting arguments to say, actually, higher density homes in the middle of the city is one of the ways that we can relieve the pressure a growing population will bring on our road networks and our need for people to travel in motorized travel. Even electric travel has a price that the planet pays for it. So I would say we're doing the work on the population's health, but in the very physical layout of Bristol and where we're putting people, that will also relieve the pressure of the growing population on our air quality. You'd be welcome to be involved in that latter conversation as well.
How can our Air Our City work with the council? Just following up on that. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do apologise. We're going to move on now to question number 25. Katrina Billings of Bristol Clean Air Alliance, also on the Clean Air Zone. Katrina, welcome.
Hi.
As with the others, I'll ask you to ask your questions to the Mayor. The Mayor will respond, and then you can ask a follow-up.
Okay. Good afternoon. Our question, I think, has already been answered. Please, can the Council give an update on the Clean Air Zone? With the lack of any public communication of progress, it's feeling unlikely that the October 21 implementation date will be met. Isn't it about time for the Council to tell the public whether there has been a delay, and if so, to justify the reason for that delay? Well, I think you have justified it this afternoon. Thank you.
And I'm just talking to Mike about our Chief Executive, about the conversations with government, when we'll be able to share the results of the latest round of negotiations with government about the implementation and the mitigations. Be over the summer, we'll be able to, autumn, sorry.
I'm only just able to hear you.
Oh, sorry, let me come forward. I was just talking to Mike's our Chief Exec, and I was just talking to Mike about the negotiations with government about about the mitigations and implementation of the clean air zone, we'll be able to come back with the results of those conversations in the autumn. So we'll have a much clearer understanding, not just of the implementation, but the measures that are going to be put in place to support households and businesses through the introduction of the clean air zone.
Yeah, thank you. And so one of my follow-up questions was going to be, how can people apply for those, for help and assistance to deal with the clean air zone? Do you know that information yet?
Yeah, it would be in the same way as applying for our standard support packages. People going through the websites to make those applications. If people have trouble getting on the internet to make those applications, I'm sure we'll be able to make other provisions to make sure that people know. I mean, we want people to know about the mitigations and the support packages because, as I said, we need the transition, we need the modal shift, but we also want to make sure that we have a transition that's fair and doesn't, adversely impact particularly the most vulnerable people and businesses in the city.
I'd be really grateful if you could send me a link to that, because we've not been able to find.
It's not up yet because the mitigations have not been finalised. Because it would depend on. It will need finance from government to cover the cost of those mitigations, and that's the negotiation that's going on there.
And can I just ask about a date? Okay, thank you.
If you email the office, we'll send you any additional numbers. Okay.
Thank you very much. Right, that concludes public forum. So we will move on to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors. And we have one petition received from Councillor Hume. Councillor Hume, you will have 1 minute to present your petition to full council.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm presenting this petition on behalf of my residents who are rightly concerned about the construction site on Filton Grove in Horfield. The petition is not to do with the site itself, but it's to do with the manner in which the construction is being carried out. Amongst other problems, residents tell me the road has been closed without notice, without proper signage. Large lorries have reversed the wrong way up a one-way street with no banks people. I'm sure you'll all agree this is a very dangerous situation, and it's also caused a lot of distress to the elderly and the vulnerable neighbours and those with young children, and particularly at the moment when people are at home so much. So the petition, which has been signed by 50 residents, that's pretty much everyone in the street, asks the council enforcement teams to intervene with rigour and vigour to ensure the building work complies with the terms set out in the construction management plan. This, in my view, is a very reasonable request. The conditions in the planning application were set out for good reason in order to mitigate disturbance and danger to local residents. I'd like to thank full council on behalf of my residents for enabling me to bring this petition to full council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move then to, so I should say a written reply will be provided for that petition. Moving to agenda item number 8, the Mayor's address to full council. This is an opportunity for the Mayor to deliver a statement to members outlining his key aims for the year ahead. So I will firstly ask Bristol's Mayor, Marvin Rees, to deliver his statement. After we've received that statement, I will then ask each of the political group leaders to respond, and then Mayor Rees will have the opportunity to make a final summing up response. Just to be clear, there is no voting on this item. Council is asked to receive and note the respective statements. So firstly then, Mayor Rees, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. And as this is my first opportunity since being elected, I will start with some thanks. First to the mayoral and councillor candidates, those who won and those who lost, who took on the challenge of running for office. To those of you in the public who turned out to vote, irrespective of who you voted for, as participation is essential to the health of our democracy. And of course, very personally, those who campaigned and voted for me really is appreciated. And I must say that while my wife has been on TV admitting that sometimes she wishes I wasn't the mayor, which I know is a view shared by a number of my trolls and one or two people in this room as well, although she only wishes it sometimes, I think they wish it all the time. It is nonetheless a profound honour to be re-elected on our record. And we laid out an ambitious agenda to the city in 2016. Bristol didn't have a reputation for delivery, And we believe it wanted a leadership that wanted to get things done. I believe they voted for a bigger picture, for a vision of an inclusive, sustainable and fairer city committed to tackling the poverty and inequalities that undermine us. They voted for affordable homes, for jobs, and they voted for hope. And you wouldn't often find me quoting Councillor Gary Hopkins, but he did once share with me, and in fact it was with all of us because it was in full council and I don't think it was meant to be helpful, that the easy part is getting elected in the first instance. The real test is to be re-elected. And having faced that test and come through, we're now confident the city wants us to continue to deliver the ambition and commission and compassion that we've tried to drive through our city leadership. And the election taught us a lot. The city is changing and certain areas are seeing dramatic demographic changes in their population and their culture. We know we face the threat of growing divides, the old ones such as race, class, health, education and earnings, and new ones such as home ownership versus non-home ownership, and those who have some trust in public institutions versus those who have none. And we know also the city really takes its planetary responsibilities seriously. The election also taught us that the conflicts and controversies, the shambles and the scandals worked up in this organisation and the way they're managed and driven through social media are often worlds away from the immediate challenges and complicated problems real people are facing in Bristol. And we learned that the people of Bristol are not interested in the weeds of the council. They want solutions to the problems they face every day, not abstract negativity, opposition for opposition's sake. They want us to be a source of hope for Bristol. The people of Bristol don't see the world in a binary, as is so often portrayed in our politics. Talking to so many people during the election, they appreciated the commitments on housing delivery, but also understood the challenges that Brexit and COVID had presented in maintaining the levels of delivery. They appreciated the need to protect land for nature and tackle climate change, but also the need to build homes for people and grow the economy for jobs. On Colston's statue, many appreciated the need to tackle racism, alongside a sense that the statue was important and symbolic, but they also appreciated the statue in itself was not the solution to racism. Some held a fear they were losing their history. Some recognized the danger of ordinary people being manipulated by those who, for lack of any real political vision, revert to manipulating them in culture wars. There are enough real challenges and divisions in the world without us conjuring up new ones for whatever political motivation. People want us to be focused on creating hope and delivering a better city. They want us to be people who are able to wrestle with the complex challenges and contradictions that cities in all their diversity embody. And I'm going to spend the next 3 years leading in these three areas: inclusion, sustainability, and delivery. So on inclusion, by this we mean inclusive growth. It means jobs and homes in a diverse economy that offers pathways to employment from people at all skill levels and education levels in Bristol. And our challenge is to develop a way of doing economic development that by its very nature redresses the historic and institutional drivers of inequality and social immobility. This rather than the old approach, which seemed to try to grow the economy and then tack a couple of equalities initiatives onto the back end of it. Second, on sustainability. This means delivering against the climate action plan and the ecological action plans. It means working as a council, but it also means working as a city to do all we can to decarbonise the energy, transport and food systems on which our city depends. It means not dealing with any single issue in isolation, but recognising the interdependence of, say, poverty, class, racism and climate change. And on that front, I will share the insight of someone who recently gave a speech at a multi-faith meeting on the environment that was organised in Easton by Afzal Shah. And that speaker shared with a gathering of Black, white and Asian Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus and Jews how too often environmentalism had been a voice of division and accusational politics, when what it should have been is a cause for unity in the face of a global challenge. We need to hear that challenge. Sustainability means not shying away from the housing crisis and the difficult conversations around density and sustainable city centre locations. It means bringing investment into green jobs and a transition to a low carbon economy. And delivery means continuing to get stuff done. Delivery means lives actually change. Homes are built, children are fed, Women and girls no longer experience period poverty. Ground source heat and water source heat pumps are installed. Schools are built. City areas are pedestrianised. Jobs are generated. Homeless people are housed. You can measure action in any city by the number of cranes on the horizon. And they are a clear example of the modernisation of Bristol, of continuing growth and opportunity. Delivery means continuing to work as a city, not just as a council. Working with partners, continuing to meet city challenges with all of our partners. Cleaner air, a living wage, mass transit, a living rent city, a city where diversity of thought leads modern 21st century city thinking. And it means continuing to put cities in the forefront of political, economic and social challenges on the world stage, putting the cities in the front of challenges where governments have failed. We have the challenge of leading a city that is growing in size of population, need, diversity, and inequality, while within the same geographical area of land. And we do this while facing up to the environment, economic, political, social, and moral need to face up to the need to tackle climate and ecological crises. And sometimes the things we must do to meet one area of these challenges can threaten to undermine our efforts to meet other challenges. So I finish with the same offer I've always made. If you have a genuine offer, a contribution to make to our efforts to meet those challenges in all their complexity, if you want to turn up with solutions, the door is open. Come and make that offer, then tell me what you need from me and the CT to enable you to deliver on it. The time I have in Mayor is loaned to me by the city. It's my job to invest it not in fruitless distractions and false politics, but in the people and the initiatives that will actually make a difference for the city, our country, and our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rees. And I'll now call Councillor Pearce to respond on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor Pearce, you have 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wish I could have the time that the Mayor didn't use of his allotment. I'm not going to get through all this, but I'll give it a best shot. In May of 2016, Marvin Rees is elected as the first person of African heritage to become mayor of a major European city. He's also told that he has to find savings of £40 million over his term and that there are no plans in place to do so. By August, further investigation reveals a £30 million hole in the council's budget left over from the previous administration. He'll now have to make £65 million a year saving, plus close any annual gap. In June, the UK votes to Brexit. The Bristol Brexit Response Group is created and response issued in face of community tensions and business concerns. And a new library opens in Lockleys. We win the Excellence Award for St Nicholas Market. The devolution deal for the West of England Combined Authority is agreed. Bristol receives Purple Flag Award for our offering. Acorn Tenants Union joins the Bristol Homes Board. In July, we begin the transformation of Bristol City Council by formally reviewing the organisation's culture and discover that there are no organisational values. We launched the Bristol Budget Simulator to help people understand the budget. In August, we launched the Bristol Culture Strategy and Bristol becomes a UNESCO City of Film. We also set out our plan to ensure a balanced budget through to 2021, despite austerity and a £65 million savings programme. Let's forget which months these things happen in. I need to make progress. We host the big housing convention to bring the city together behind our ambition to build homes. We launched the Bristol Clean Streets campaign, enter into agreements for the development of Engine Shed 2, the extension of the Temple Quarter Enterprise Zone, supporting the redevelopment of Temple Quarter through greater business rate retentions. The Philwood Green Business Park is named Green Business of the Year at the Business Leader Awards. There are those that would abandon the mayoral government model in favour of a committee system. LiveWell Bristol has launched a new health advice website. The Bristol Futures Academy and the Bristol Resilience Strategy is launched as part of the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities work. The Children and Young People Strategy is launched. Warm Winter Coats Initiative is launched for street homeless. Committees. I recall the committee that was formed to produce a new, improved version of the horse. Bristol wins European City of Sport status. Hillfields and Little Hayes Family Centre reopens as a combined family hub and library. The new Horse Committee only managed to deliver a camel. It was late and it was over budget. Speaking of budgets, the 2017 budget is agreed, including £65 million of savings, along with £1 million for libraries, £3 million for parks, £4 million for a household waste recycling centre, £4.5 million for sports facilities, £8 million for CCTV improvements, £15 million for aids and adaptations for disabled people in private homes, £15 million more for a project to deliver superfast broadband, and £275 million for new housing. Bristol City Council becomes the first local authority to ban the box. Invest £25 million for a new school in Lockleys, and a tree is planted in memory of Bijan Ibrahimi.
1 minute left, Councillor.
I've been a bit disappointed by our pace of delivery, not due to a lack of political will, but to a lack of delivery capacity brought about by 10 years of austerity and 18 months of a COVID crisis governance programme. £76.4 million of annual budget savings are now required in 18-19 on top of the previously identified 65. However, £78 million for new schools, £47 for the Beacon, £5 million for local community capacity building, £4 million for Lawrence Weston Community Centre, £1.3 million for Knoll West regeneration. Bristol City Council launches a strategy to double tree canopy. Did I mention that there were those that would do away with the mayoral model? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll now ask Councillor O'Rourke to respond for the Green Group. And Councillor O'Rourke, you'll also have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll respond to Marvin, who really did describe that the winds of change are blowing. And there are big winds, like the jet stream, that change the atmosphere across hemispheres. And metaphorically, we've had a jet stream of change in attitudes across the world, brought about by events like George Floyd's murder and the resulting Black Lives Matter, by Extinction Rebellion, which is another big wind that has blown the climate emergency into place, front and centre in people's minds, and the systemic crisis posed by coronavirus, which has blown many things into sharp focus. These major winds have brought a real and urgent desire for change. And the Green Group of councillors in the chamber today have grown from a balmy 11 to a gusty 24. During lockdowns, people looked at how we lived our lives differently. With shops shut and demands and distraction of consumerism lessened, we were replaced by more time with family and working from home. For many, the lockdowns were a chance to press reset, to consider another way of living and to appreciate our green spaces. But for many others, the pandemic meant unemployment, poverty and isolation. It has cast a harsh light onto the UK's inequality, on our housing and health crises, and the poorest have been hit hardest by both economic and health impacts. COVID forced the government to take unprecedented action, to pay workers' wages, house the homeless, and prevent evictions. And now that people have seen these things happen, they rightly believe that we shouldn't return to the old status quo, which is fundamentally broken. So, progressive green ideas like a universal basic income or a 4-day week they've all been seen in a new light, which I think has led to the change that we see here today. At a more local level, there are a number of other factors that have brought more Greens into the council. People recognise the need to develop parts of the city, but they want to have a say in how it happens, and they want to protect Bristol's unique character. Bristolians have told us that they want improved democracy, that they are concerned about the high degree of executive power that the mayoral model allows. People want real action on the climate and ecological crises. They want streets for people, not just for private cars, and they want clean, breathable air. Education is another area where we are told that we need to effect change, especially in the SEND budget. So, now that we're elected, what do we plan to do? Well, for the next 3 years, we will use our position on scrutiny to improve oversight on policy making. We'll work with officers and cabinet members to better know what changes are planned or possible. And we'll bring those plans to public meetings at an earlier stage of development so that people can know and comment on what's in the pipeline. And I know that our Chair of OSM, Carla Denyer, has the skills and energy to bring real change into this area of administration. We'll work to improve democracy by continuing to develop deliberative processes. The Citizens' Assembly has been a great start, and we'll push for a participatory element in the budget next year. And I think I have the support of the Mayor in that. We will also press for a review of governance and for improved checks and balances on the power of the Mayor. But we would want to be certain that change in this area is done with great care and done for the right reasons. We have also elected a Green shadow cabinet to mirror the Mayor's Labour-only cabinet. The purpose of this body is to have lead members in each of the portfolios. And by having strong, well-informed leads in each of the cabinet portfolios, we will be best placed to hold the administration to account. That said, we are still having meetings with Marvin and his team, and we hope to find ways to build trust. We want to work for the city, thank you, we want to work for the city, and we will not put tribal politics before the needs of the people of Bristol. We're determined to do that. I am proud to stand here today as the leader of a group which works by the principle that we should do the right thing for its own sake. Bristol has an opportunity to recover from the pandemic, to be a stronger, healthier, greener, and a fairer city than it was before.
You need to wind up now,
I will now. We're not to return to the broken status quo. With our increased influence in this council, we will make sure that in the next 3 years, Bristol politics will not be in the doldrums. We hear and meet the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Weston to speak for the Conservative Party. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, and hello, colleagues. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I suspect my list of this administration's achievements might well not be quite the same as yours. Yours seems to miss quite a few things, if you don't mind me saying. However, with that said, congratulations to everyone who's here. We've all just come through an extraordinary set of elections, campaigning as we did through COVID, not being able to knock on doors until the 8th of March. It's a hell of an achievement. Most of us are used to going out there years in advance. And Chris and I were commenting that I think it was the 18th of March the year before, we had to wind up our canvassing because the elections were postponed. I certainly hope we don't have another election set like this, and I'd imagine the Mayor shares that as well. Post-election, it's a time for calm, I think. I think it's a time when we can try and reset the political heat. The fracas is over. The gladiatorial nature of elections aren't going to be coming our way for a couple of years. So we actually have a chance to try and work together. Politics is a grubby business. It's set almost in a gladiatorial combat as we try and tear chunks out of each other all the time. And I fear that one of the things that's lost, the early casualty, is respectful debate. And I see this across the city. We seem to be losing the ability to disagree with someone and still be friends, to still go for a drink, have that heated punch up in the chamber and still be perfectly polite while we do it. Now when we disagree, we tear chunks of each other, we try and cancel each other, and it's ugly. It makes you wonder why you're here. Some of you newbies, welcome, good luck. But we can do it better. I don't think, if we're honest about it, we are going to agree on everything. Some might say anything. But where we can, I think, bring unity is we can bring unity in our approach, our unity for debate. So my olive branch to the mayor at this point is we will try and be as respectful as we can with each other when we come to debate the big issues. And let's try and bring the city together with that again. Let's try and find that ability for the nuance, for the ability to talk without tearing each other down. Our city is divided and it does face serious challenges. COVID has brought them to sharp relief, and we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. But we faced problems before that, we're going to face it again. When it comes to transport, how are we going to cut congestion without damaging the suburbs who often have to rely on a car because the public transport isn't there yet? So how do we improve public transport while we do that? How are we going to build affordable housing without damaging our environment? How are the finances going to work? I mean, the government has poured 407 billion into COVID, but the bill goes on and on. Can we work together and lobby on that? How are we going to protect our natural environment as well as reduce emissions and protect the economy? The list is endless. I know I've missed ones out. We won't agree on all the solutions. We probably won't even agree on the scale of all the problems. But as has been said, and the mayor said it, we can reach out to each other and we can try and work together. If you need our help, or we need your help, then we should be able to talk to each other and offer joint lobbying. It's not a sign of weakness to try and bring ourselves together and try and lobby as a group, to try and bring out those achievements, because the one thing that does unite us all is we want to serve our communities and serve our residents. Now is the time of a reset. Now is the time that we can actually try and do that.
1 minute remaining.
And my advice to the mayor, because I know that the thing that every Labour mayor loves most is advice from a Conservative opponent. And I know he will appreciate it. My advice on this is to get the basics right. Honestly, when it comes to it, all our inboxes are filled up when the little things go wrong. And I think the problem is if the public see the little things go wrong, they lose faith on the big projects and we don't take them with them because they just think, oh, you're rubbish. We have to get the basics right first. And above all, I would say to the mayor, please don't ignore the suburbs. Often when we are talking in this chamber, we talk about the centre. The centre is just the point at which the rest of the city pivots. There is more than the centre. Don't forget us out there. There are many of us and we are legion. So we work together where we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. Congratulations. Let's bring on the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll now call Councillor Clark to respond on behalf of the Liberal Democrats. Thank you. Councillor Clark, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mayor, for your speech. As we emerge from the pandemic, there is much to do and many issues that we need to address. I would firstly like to pay tribute to all the NHS workers and other frontline workers that have kept our city functioning over the past 18 months. Special thanks must go to Christina Gray and all of her team for their professionalism and steering the city through this crisis. They have worked tirelessly to promote the vaccine programme and engaged with those difficult to reach groups. It is also worth noting the sensitivity and care that they used around outbreaks and spikes in infection. It is clear that there is much to do to get this city back on track and much to improve over the coming years and months. There is no question that we cannot afford to spend money unwisely or on any vanity projects. It will be a long time before we get over the financial shock of the energy company, the Bristol Beacon Centre, and any fallout from the Brislington Meadows U-turn. Our citizens expect their money to be spent delivering services to them, such as our excellent libraries, good quality social housing, and public toilets, all of which have suffered of late. The development of Arena Island site will be a tangible indication of this city moving forward. And as an emerging opposition, we will keep a close eye on this and other projects to ensure they are carried out to maximise the future of our citizens, providing quality services at the best value for money, while continuing to support our key aim of a sustainable and inclusive society. We need at every turn to engage with our communities as they know their areas better than anyone. Over the past 5 years, we have seen communities ignored and trampled on by the Mayor's office, determined to build a legacy from the Cumberland Basin to the South Bristol Ring Road, the Brislington Greenway to the A4018 bus lane. We see local people's views pushed to the background in favour of large business and external consultants. The Liberal Democrats will fight tooth and nail to be the voice of those communities. Our children will need help to come to terms with the loss of their education and life opportunities over the lost opportunities over the past 18 months, and we have a duty to enable them to reach their potential in the future. Inevitably, other groups have suffered, with the impact on older people being devastating, with the loss of social interaction and months of isolation, cut off from families and friends. We need to work with our partners to ensure that those connections are re-established and preserve the outstanding civic and community mindedness we saw in the depths of the pandemic. The impact on the world of work is as yet unclear, but the Council will need to work with partners such as Business West to reinvigorate our local high streets and the centre of Bristol as a destination with purpose and focus that works for everyone.
1 minute remaining, Councillor.
Thank you. As the world opens up and we start to move around more, the Council will need to focus on enabling us to leave our cars at home and use alternatives which best suit our needs. So the Council will need to listen to its residents and break down the barriers to the alternatives to car use, and promote wider bus and rail travel, as well as enabling our active travel routes. With another delay to the clean air zone, we must reinvigorate our push for sustainability at all levels, from the large projects to the small schemes. Only together can we deliver the change we need to reach by 2030 with our carbon neutral goals. I believe that Bristol has many strengths, and we must take the emergence from the pandemic as an opportunity to continue our growth in a sustainable and inclusive way. By working with local residents and community groups, we can foster a new age for the city that will lead us to the betterment of all our citizens. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and I'll now ask the Mayor to make a concluding statement. Mayor Rees, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, no need to spend too long on it. I mean, we know what the challenges are. It's poverty, it's sustainability, it's ecological emergency, and how these challenges then spill over into how they manifest themselves, a distrusting population, people feeling distanced from institutions, and the interplay between those challenges as well. We're involved in a piece of work which is an honour as a city. We sit on the Mayor's Migration Council, but we're involved in a piece of work with C40 and the Mayor's Migration Council on climate-driven migration that talks about the potential of 200 million climate-driven migrants by the middle of this century, and how we make sure we get the scale of investment that's needed to actually make the interventions that are needed to reduce the carbon emissions or the carbon dependency of our major cities. So that sometimes seems like an abstract challenges when we're talking about potholes and bins, but it's on the full spectrum of the range of responsibilities that we have as an authority in a major city now, to look at those everyday challenges facing Bristol people, but to look at our position and our responsibility on a planetary level as well, which ultimately, if we don't deal with it, will come back and have implications for people in the city as well. We're already a city that has climate-driven migrants living in us now. So that's the challenge. And as I said, I just think in the face of that, in the face of the financial challenges we face as a local authority, that there isn't time to mess about. And it's all hands on deck. It's about access and diversity of thought. But, I know, Paula, we've talked about trust. When we set up the first cross-party cabinet, I don't call it rainbow, we went away and we talked about the values we would want to live with. And we didn't talk about being trusting, we talked about being trustworthy. And I think there's a subtle but significant difference. Naive people just throw their trust around, all right? It's about earning the ability to be trusted. That's being trustworthy. And I think there is a ways to go, because for all the, the speeches we make, and I'm not claiming to be a saint or anything, but for all the speeches that are made, trustworthiness is not something necessarily that is in abundance within this council, and that's not just about, that's not just a recent thing, that is an ongoing thing. So I think that's one of the first places we need to start thinking about. How do we become trustworthy? And I will say, what trustworthy means is not shaking a hand with your right hand where you slap someone on the back of the head with the left, right? That doesn't create the conditions for trustworthiness. If we're going to be trustworthy, let's have the conversations upstream. Let's resist the temptation to go and get some cheap hits on Twitter or a cheap quote in the local press, and do the real job of having gritty conversations that deal with a complicated city with contradictory challenges. And if we're willing to do that, the door's open. I will say this is something that we're doing with the rest of the city. The one city approach, the one city gatherings, the thematic boards are places where people come together across organizational boundaries, sometimes between unions, employers, voluntary sector organization, large public sector, sometimes groups with conflicting interests. But it's places where people come together and say, actually, there is something that transcends our differences that we can all rally to, whether it be feeding our children, building houses, tackling the transport problems, digital exclusion, period poverty, and the city is rallied around those things. And I think there is something that perhaps we, as a political organization, in the way we do politics, can learn from the way the city has actually started to work to those ends and produce the One City Plan. So, as I said before, the door's open. We've developed a process in the city that we've called, and I'll say it again, make us a big offer and make a big ask. It is about turning up with solutions. We can specialize in trying to ask questions and all that, the rest of it. Questions, are great. Solutions are much more welcome in a world that needs solutions to some of those complex challenges yesterday. So make a big offer. Make a big offer about how you are going to help us solve these complex city challenges with a finite budget and limited piece of land and not much time available to us. And then tell us what you need, the connections, the organizations. Don't ask for £1 million. That's not all around the place, but resource can be made available as to how we can work together to meet those challenges. If we take that approach, we're all in play. If it's just cheap shots from Twitter, then obviously, you know, then trustworthiness is not something that we would see much of. But the offer's there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I said earlier, Council is asked to receive and note those statements. So we move on to agenda item 9, the Equality and Inclusion Annual Report. And just before I call Councillor Craig to introduce the report, I'll just say those councillors who know that you're speaking hopefully all know where you are in the running order. So if you're not seated near the microphone, if you can move across to the benches at the side there while the person before you is speaking, it'll help us just to move through the agenda a little bit more quickly. So I'll call Councillor Asher Craig, please, to introduce the report. Councillor Craig, you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Equality and inclusion is central to who we are as a city and what we do as a council. So I am pleased to bring this report before full council. 2020 has brought many stark inequalities to light. While the pandemic has profoundly affected everyone in Bristol, it also disproportionately affects the less well-off and Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities who, as we all know, have higher chances of contracting and dying from COVID. As well as this, we also had global attention on racial inequalities in Bristol through the toppling of the Colston statue and the Black Lives Matter movement. This past year reiterates the need for equality and inclusion to be at the forefront of everything that we do. And I'm pleased to say that this report sets out the progress we've made. This progress includes a refreshed equality and inclusion policy and strategy, an updated equality impact assessment process, an updated workforce strategy, a new corporate equality governance structure, the relaunch of our internal staff-led groups, improved diversity monitoring and reporting, and several new positive action initiatives. We measure progress as the extent we are working towards with our goals in the Equality and Inclusion Strategy for 2018 to 2023, which was unanimously voted for by full council. We are making progress towards all the objectives in the strategy and have come a long way from where we started. The report itself states that in recent years, we started from a low baseline, but are now among national leaders in equality, diversity, and inclusion. The strategy sets out our objectives and how to go about not only building an inclusive, diverse organisation, but an inclusive and diverse city. We are building a city of hope where everyone shares in its success and no one is left behind. And the report recognises our progress towards that. We've made good progress on every aim in the strategy, which I'm sure is something that everyone can welcome. Although I acknowledge that we can always go further, 2020 shined a light on equality and inclusivity issues, and we need to use that heightened awareness as a catalyst for continued self-improvement.
30 seconds remaining, Councillor.
I would like to finish by thanking the officers for the work that has gone into these 3 reports, which represent an important chapter in our progress towards becoming an inclusive organisation that builds on and benefits from the diversity and the city that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig. Moving to speakers from the other groups, I'll call Councillor Dyer of the Green Group. Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer. You also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is my first speech as an elected representative, and I know my family are watching at home. I also have to say, looking around this chamber, I see many fellow elected colleagues who have faced discrimination and disadvantage. Discrimination and disadvantage because of the colour of our skin, our gender, our sexual orientation, because of disability or health, because of our age. Sadly, the list goes on. Some of us, both in this room and across the city, also face barriers to success because of where we live or grew up, because of our family background. because of our class. There exists in this city a sharp division, a division that seems much more than any other English city based on accent. We know what high-paid executives born in this city sound like, and we know what low-paid cleaners born in this city sound like, and we know which groups sound more like me and which groups sound more like BBC presenters. But I also look around and I see many allies in this chamber, and I recognise that I am only able to speak to you today thanks to the support not only of those who face similar barriers as myself, but also those who recognise their own privilege and the need to reach out to those of us who need their support. I therefore feel confident in calling on all those elected to office in our city to work hard to ensure that this council is at the forefront of efforts to reduce inequality, that we set the standards we want others to emulate across our city. And that includes challenging class prejudice as a major barrier to progress in our city. I welcome and applaud this report. The efforts being made and the progress being made by so many, but I also recognise, and I'm sure everybody else in this room does, that we still have a long way before we build that city of hope for all. However, I look forward to working alongside others to meet that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer, and congratulations on your maiden speech as well. I now call Councillor Gollop of the Conservative Group. Councillor Gollop, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to start by making clear that my commitment and my party's commitment to equality cannot be questioned. We understand the importance and how fundamental it is. But Lord Mayor, I have to ask you to excuse me for being a little sceptical if I challenge this report, because it seems to me that some equalities are being treated as more equal than others. I ask members, is this fair? I don't think so. Is the report trying to deal with those we employ or those we serve? I'm glad to be told repeatedly that we are getting better at the way we treat our staff, although the public forum statements didn't quite suggest that. Of course, we should measure our employee statistics against our city, and we should aim to be representative. But, Lord Mayor, it is our services that have the most impact on our residents, and our failures to respond can be hugely detrimental to family life. I want to choose 3 groups to highlight. Firstly, children with special educational needs. We know those children need an education and healthcare plan, but we still have a long way to go in issuing them. How can we be inclusive when we don't know because we haven't identified how much the need is? In the first 2 pages of the report, you mentioned the journey the council has been on 4 times. I would suggest that it might be better if you mentioned the journey these parents and families have been on that is far from ending. The latest information available still shows more requests each month than reports being issued, an increasing backlog. Secondly, let's look at the other end of the age range. Are we really looking at what is best for our elderly residents? It seems to me, Lord Mayor, that closing public toilets didn't seem that age-friendly. But too often, elderly residents and their families don't know where to turn for help. And instead of being guided to get support, their health deteriorates until they end up in hospital. My third category is looking at adults with special needs, where the council is now pulling funding for drop-in groups and group social activities, with the expectation that people who are seriously isolated and lonely because they cannot organise themselves will now take on the responsibility of doing just that.
30 seconds remaining.
Asher, you may have done the most fantastic job with staff. You've told us so, but you have a long way to go for our residents. I specifically chose these 3 examples because they apply equally across race, colour, gender and sexuality. My Lord Mayor, we have failed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Classic, you have 3 minutes.
So much like Councillor Dyer, this is my first speech as an elected official, so hopefully it goes okay. I'd actually like to start off by welcoming Bristol City Council's continued commitment to equalities and inclusion as a workplace. So often those words are bandied about just as buzzwords, and employers often pay lip service without actually committing to the work that is needed to create truly inclusive workplaces. As a city, we cannot serve our residents while our workplace doesn't have truly inclusive and equal policies. And I'm glad that the report has actual concrete ideas, suggestions, and ways of measuring those ideas in the workplace. Bristol has a strong reputation as a city thriving with diversity. We made international headlines last year during Black Lives Matter with the toppling of the Colston statue. But at the same time, the impact of COVID has highlighted huge inequalities between citizens of Bristol. As a council, we have a responsibility to continue this commitment to equalities, not just for the benefit of our own staff, but we have a commitment to be role models and leaders to other employers in the city. It is commendable that Bristol was the first major city to start publishing not just gender pay gap data, but data on ethnicity pay gaps and disability. And I'm pleased to see that LGBT plus pay gap reporting will also be included. It is positive to see this openness and transparency, but openness and transparency is nothing without action. And the last year, the impact of COVID has hampered some of those actions going forward. We are seeing areas that we've not been able to make as much progress as possible, and that needs to change coming out of the pandemic. This has also highlighted major divides, specifically in things like wealth inequality in the city, education, and these are real major issues that need to be tackled post-COVID. I hope that going forward, the council continues this enthusiasm that they've clearly shown in this report and widens the scope of the inclusions and equalities to other areas mentioned by previous speakers today. So I thank the work that's already been done and hope that we continue for the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Classic, and again, congratulations on making your maiden speech today. That concludes the debate. Councillor Craig or Mayor, would you like to respond?
Would you like to respond, Ash, or shall I? I don't mind if you want to take it. It's okay. I'm happy to, though. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ash. So, first off, I'd like to thank, how many minutes have I got, sorry? 3, okay. Thank you to Asha and the officers and all that have put so much work into that, and the responsiveness of them. Thank Mike and the senior leadership team that we've brought in, and I will say that when we recruited our senior team, the point we made often is that it needs to be a values-based recruitment. We can find accountants and lawyers everywhere. That's not the problem. We can find technical ability, but what you can't always find is people who have the ability to release the talents and abilities of people around them. With the new leadership team, what we have is a leadership that has the values that we believe this authority in the council, has needed, and it hasn't always had that. So thank you to everyone involved. I want to pick up on Tony's point as well about allies. That's a word that's been bandied around a lot over recent years, of people have grappled to understand what they mean by issues of advantage and discrimination. And I will say that when I hear someone speak who I think has a genuine understanding, there is a real kind of freedom, a lightness that comes across. It's even more light when I think they've had lived experience and they bring it, and it's not just words, but it is genuine understanding. And actually that feeds into questions of trustworthiness as well. I won't address Jeff's comments. I would just refer to some of the things that have happened, those solid interventions, the staff-led groups being started, again, stepping up, now working not just with people from African and Asian heritage backgrounds, but with women and disabled people, not just in the council, but in employers across the city as well. getting promoted, real promotions in work. So you've got that background of people who enter into more senior positions in the city. Our commitment, which is a commitment on Mike's own work docket to make sure that we are recruiting much more diversity into the senior leadership in the council. The national reputation that's led to us hosting national equalities events within Bristol, and has actually resulted in an approach from the Prince's Foundation, the Prince's Trust, to do a work of national consequence with us. The recruitment of our magistrates, and for those of you that don't know, the criminal justice can often be a fork in the road for people from disadvantaged backgrounds, but bringing the greater diversity to the benches doesn't happen by accident, it happens on purpose. And a third of our magistrates a couple of years ago come from Black and African and Asian heritage backgrounds. That's never happened in the city before, but we did that on purpose. And as the point was made about the pay gaps, again, putting the evidence on the table. This is going to be one of our core commitments in terms of us being a world-class employer in our corporate strategy. And I would say too, I think what we have seen is not just action within the council, but a whole range of organizations talking to us. And I get emails almost on a weekly basis. How can you help me recruit diversity into my leadership? These things weren't happening before. They are happening now. So whether we feel it or not, those of us that are on the margins of society will know that there has been a temperature change in the city's attitude towards equality and inclusion, and that is to be welcomed. And let's hope it doesn't get stuffed back in the bottle if we are no longer here at some point.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The recommendation is for Council to note the report, so that report is noted. We move on now to agenda item 10, Bristol's first Citizens' Assembly recommendations. And once again, I'll ask Councillor Asher Craig to introduce the report. Councillor Craig, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to start by thanking Councillor Paula O'Rourke for the work that she put in alongside myself to make the Citizens' Assembly a reality. I may be first to the podium, but this was a true joint effort, and I'm really pleased to jointly move this report with her. It's a success story of cross-party working and something that I hope will be replicated in the future. I want to take this opportunity to reiterate to all councillors that I'm always happy to work together on common ground. If you have a project like this that you would like to collaborate on, then you're always welcome to get in touch. Although not only is it a success story of cross-party working, it's a story of cross-community working. A city as diverse as Bristol coming together to discuss solutions to the city's problems. This is something we have always sought to do through the One City Plan. The Citizens' Assembly's recommendations will feed into it and our corporate strategy. While the Citizens' Assembly membership was as diverse as Bristol itself, and there was lively, constructive debate, their recommendations had a broad degree of support amongst the participants. Of the recommendations, the one with the highest degree of opposition was only 6%. The Citizens' Assembly also showed broad support for reducing inequality, affordable housing, green transport, and sustainability, amongst a number of important issues. So it's safe to say that this administration is acting on Bristol's priorities. It's reassuring to see that we're on the same page as the public on these issues, and I hope that other parties in the council are also up to speed with the public. The media in the UK likes to often paint the country as deeply divided, and while in some sense that's true, I'd like to think the results of this Citizens' Assembly show that we have more in common than that which divides us. As well as saying thank you to Paula for her work on this, I would also like to thank the participants in the Citizens' Assembly who gave up their weekends to put forward solutions to Bristol's issues. The public having their say is vitally important in democracy.
30
and
seconds
the Citizens' Assembly has proved a very effective way for them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll now call Councillor O'Rourke to second the report.
I think I have to say that the first line I've written down here is that I said that although I'm standing up to second it, in my heart I'm jointly, and then Asher says the exact same thing. So all the way through, we have worked incredibly well together. And I think it's a really good example of cross-party working. I think, both of us together have achieved a lot more than we would have done separately. So I think it's absolutely a model to take forward. So I too would like to thank the citizens for taking part in this. It's clear from the recommendations that they know the city really well. And it's also a testimony to what I believed in when, I first proposed this motion in January 2020 because I wanted to reboot democracy. I felt that people weren't engaged, and I really believed that if you gave citizens informed opinions, they would come up with the right decisions. And I think when you look at the recommendations that are being presented here today, you can absolutely see that the trust we placed in them was the right thing to do. And I would really urge people to look beneath the recommendations at the actions that the citizens have proposed. And one of them, they're so concrete and so real, and they are a strong mandate for us to change the city in the direction that our citizens want. And I give you one example. If you look underneath recommendation 9, which says that we need to improve our transport, one of the actions is, it says that by 2030, our citizens want 80% of all journeys in Bristol to be by public or active travel. So in order to do that, they've suggested that every year leading up to then, we remove between 3 and 5% of road space for cars and parking space for cars and hand that over to bicycles and for people to walk and for green space. And that sounds such a realistic, challenging and good decision that I think we can really put our support behind that. But I'd also like to say that in the original motion that started all this off, there was a second suggestion for a pilot on participatory budgets. And I know that Marvin has suggested before that he is in favour of this. So I would urge everybody to reconsider this, and we will be really pressing for that in next year's budget, so that some money could be devolved, say, down to the area committees, where we could re-energise those committees. And I think it would be a really forward way. And so embedding these deliberative processes, it's the right thing to do. We've been shown, we gave our trust to the citizens, and they've paid us back in plenty. So good decisions made jointly, working jointly, all for the city. That's the way we like to do things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I understand at this point we have a video of the Citizens' Assembly to see before we proceed with the debate.
Last year, when Asher metaphorically reached her hand across the chamber floor in the full council, when we decided that we needed to reboot democracy, we never really thought that we'd end up a year later with such a fantastic set of recommendations. I think it really goes to show that if you trust people, if you give the citizens an opportunity to have informed opinions, they will make the right decisions. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank citizens, all of those people who took part, all the facilitators and the advisors who gave up their time to tell us how they want us to build back better and to recover from COVID.
And I also want to thank all of the Assembly members who participated in this. It was really important from us from day one that we got a true reflection of the diversity of the whole city. And I think we achieved that with the Assembly members. And, there were a lot of people that were sceptical, but I have to say the Assembly members did a phenomenal job. They have delivered the recommendations, 82 actions, and we are now going to take that back into the local authority and across our one city boards to deliver on those actions and recommendations. So we're here to listen. We have listened, and hopefully beyond this Citizens' Assembly, the plan is that we will incorporate this process into the democratic process of the local authority going forward. So again, thank you to everybody who participated.
Marvin, please accept this on behalf of the Citizens' Assembly and give it to the Cabinet. That would be great, thank you. We've put a lot of hard work into it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for that hard work and all the time you spent, you know, wrestling with issues, listening to people make their contributions, looking at those interdependencies as well. What was the highlight of the process for you?
Just meeting all the different demographic of people that were chosen from all over Bristol, and just being able to speak to people that you would have never spoke to from all over Bristol and just hear completely different opinions. I think we all got on really well as a group, and everyone gave some really good feedback, and it would be really nice for it to be taken on board.
It was really good fun. It was nice to meet people from around Bristol, and I learnt a large amount of knowledge about things that previously I didn't know. It was nice to get a more well-rounded point of view on how the council works to overcome issues in and around Bristol.
But what motivated you to get involved?
Social conscience. I try and sort of do different things connected with the community and the council when I can, because although we can't all be in there behind us doing different things, we all can have a voice and care for the society that we're in.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic, and we absolutely want more people to have that opportunity to speak in. It's for the health of democracy. Not everyone has to be elected or be a governor or board member, but we need to create those channels. So thank you very much for all you've done.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
When we launched the Citizens' Assembly, we couldn't have anticipated what was going to come our way as a city. We faced the pandemic in Bristol, and it's thrown so much into the air and brought incredible challenge to the way we run our services, manage our relationships. So it's come at really the right time, releasing this citizens' energy, the citizens' expertise, the diversity and the dynamism of thought that's out in our wider population has been hugely beneficial to Bristol. Next steps for us is to really make these recommendations real. We've got the recommendations that have come out. These are being fed into the whole one city approach we developed in a city over the last few years. They will be fed into the refresh of Bristol's One City plan. They'll be fed into the corporate strategy. The cabinet members will be taking these recommendations into account. So they will go into shaping the future direction, the future prioritisations that we have in Bristol. I want to give a big thanks to Councillors Craig and Councillor O'Rourke as well. The two councillors who really picked up this challenge, this opportunity, and brought it to the city. And obviously a big thanks to all the citizens who participated in the panel. One citizens panel member just said to me it's the most they've learnt in a short period of time since they can remember, many years. So that's very special. Really looking forward to more people engaging in the whole process. You know, really looking forward to more people having a space to really grapple in a meaningful way with the opportunities and the challenges facing Bristol. Thank you.
From the other groups, and I'll call Councillor Galandris of the Conservative Group. Councillor Galandris, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Firstly, may I also thank the participants who have given up a lot of their time. Thank you. I welcome every type of public consultation. It all helps the democratic process. However, the role of council is to scrutinise and to act as a critical friend. So whilst welcoming this additional form of public engagement, it would be remiss of me not to add a few notes of caution. In May 2021, over 140,000 Bristol citizens democratically voted for 70 councillors and a Bristol mayor. Democratically elected members are the transparent choice of citizens to represent them, and in turn, those elected are accountable publicly. So I get a little nervous when 60 non-elected, completely unaccountable individuals are chosen to act as key influencers in deliberative democracy, whatever that term might mean. We are told the 60 selected genuinely reflect all opinions right across Bristol, but no opinion pollster would ever use such a small sample. Also, just look at the geography in the report. Central Bristol is grossly overrepresented in the Citizens' Assembly with nearly 32% of the members, but a population of 25%. North Bristol, by contrast, the suburbs, seriously underrepresented. Some wards had no representatives at all. That's hardly fair and democratic. If the aim is to engage more directly with citizens and to have a form of direct people power, we will need to tread carefully. Democracy is a Greek word, demos meaning the people and kratos meaning the government, literally in Greek people power. In 6th century BC Athens, all Athenian male citizens could debate and vote directly. But the nearest equivalent today would not be citizens' assemblies, but local decision-making by referendum, as practiced in Switzerland, many of the US states and parts of the EU. I don't have a problem with referenda and would always respect the voter's choice. But I have a feeling not everyone in this chamber would be equally relaxed with regular referenda. In summary, representative democracy with directly elected councillors isn't a perfect system, but you tamper with it at your peril. I welcome citizens' assemblies to assist with public consultation, but I would caution setting too much store on deliberative democracy, lest voters decide that if elected representatives seek to pass decision-making to very small focus groups, they may instead opt for something more like Athenian democracy, more referenda. Oh, joy. So, many thanks to all those involved in this experiment, but I urge the administration to consider that 140,000 voters rank well ahead of just 60 individuals. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Brown from the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Brown, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. First, on behalf of the Lib Dem Group, I would like to thank all those who took part in the Citizens' Assembly and all those who were involved in its organisation against the backdrop of COVID, remote working and adapting to the need for virtual meetings. It's not been an easy year, so thank you. As a group, we supported the motion that proposed the use of citizens' assemblies in the city, and whilst we have some reservations about the model, particularly around ensuring democratic oversight, we believe that such assemblies can have a role to play in addressing the big issues in our city, and I think this report shows that. The 17 recommendations, the underlying 82 actions, cover a wide range of areas. To tackle these will require action not just from the Mayor and his Cabinet, but from all of us all, both as councillors and as residents of the city. Many of the recommendations make reference to utilising local skills, local creativity and local communities, and I hope that we can find ways to further those aims in our own wards as local councillors. I think it's notable that the recommendations all had substantial support from the members of the Assembly when you look through the list of those who strongly supported or supported the different recommendations versus those who opposed them. I also think it's notable that the Assembly members had a high degree of confidence that their recommendations would make a difference. Perhaps that should be a lesson to those of us who are a bit more jaded and cynical about the ability of individuals to influence this council, and we mustn't let them down. Having established the model, we must now work to ensure that the proposals are implemented as far as possible. It's proposed that there will be 6 monthly updates posted on the Assembly's website. I hope that we will have other opportunities to track progress, whether through scrutiny processes or other presentations or motions to this council. This needs to involve us all as elected representatives, as well as the Mayor, the Cabinet and the One City approach. Finally, I hope that those who participated will not feel that that is that. We must find ways not just to keep the Assembly members engaged, but the wider populace. These issues require us to take people with us rather than to lecture them. Once we achieve that, then we can claim to have really demonstrated the power of participatory democracy in this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to conclude the debate, Maurice, would you like to respond?
Thank you thank you very much. So just on the position of the One City plan, as I shared there, we are going to build this form of engagement into the rhythm of the city. It will be part of the annual schedule of events for the refresh of the Bristol One City Plan. And I've also asked the Cabinet, I'm also asking the thematic boards to build the whole idea of the way Citizens Assembly work into engagements with the public around their specialist areas as well. So it could be some citizen engagement event around housing or climate ecology, waste energy, any of those themes, or health and wellbeing and so forth. But anyway, more work's to be done on that. Secondly, I think Councillor Glandris does have a point on the limitations of all interventions. But I would also then say that's why this is part of a collection of avenues we're opening up to complement, not to compete with each other. So we continue, and I've been talking to our chief exec and our monitoring officer about having very hard targets around voter registration and voter participation. Don't just run a democratic process and see who turns up. We should, and it'd be welcome to work with you all, proactively be targeting levels of voter participation. We've got the city office, which is engaged, enabled more people to influence what we choose as city prioritize, including the youth mayors, Babassa, and so forth. We have direct engagement, our administration. I would suggest, I think it's there that people from a wider range of backgrounds feel they can approach us and access us and influence what we're thinking and what we're saying. And I'd also add in that tackling poverty and social immobility are critical to democracy. Tackling that democratic deficit is not just about running a project, it is poverty and social immobility that are among the biggest impediments to having a voice in our democratic process. And let's remember that the way institutional discrimination and the way institutional advantage work is that some people don't even have to say anything for the systems to work for them and to bend to their interests. And some people, no matter how much they say, are always pushing water uphill. So we do the programs, but we tackle the wider inequalities in our society as well. Just in terms of feedback of some of the people I met at the launch, you know, I'd say three quick things, things that really touched me about what they said. One is they felt valued and heard. That's important. Many people don't, right? And actually, their feelings of not feeling valued and heard are justified because this is a world that has not heard and valued many of the people on the planet's surface. Secondly, they dealt with complexity. One of the people said to me, I didn't just think about single issues, I actually talked about how that issue interacted with other issues, and sometimes they contradicted each other. And thirdly, one of them said to me, as a result of that, he is going to go back into education. Isn't that amazing? It didn't just benefit the city, it benefited individuals rejuvenated and refreshed in his desire to learn about how to run a city. And I thought those were unintended benefits that are very special to the city. So thank you, Paula. Thank you for Asha for picking this up and driving this. Thank you to John Toy as well, who did a lot of the legwork as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is for Council to note the report, and so the report is noted. We move now to agenda item 11, a constitution update, which is a change in membership of the Licensing Committee. So I move the report, which proposes the change in membership, which is that Councillor Edwards will sit instead of Councillor McCowie. Please can I ask the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Varney, to second the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second report, reserving my remarks.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is that Council adopts the changed Licensing Committee membership. All those in favour say aye. Aye. And against say no. Good, the ayes have it, and that change is approved. That concludes this agenda item. So we'll now adjourn for 20 minutes, and we will return again at 8 o'clock. Please be here promptly to start at 8 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, are we back on? Thank you very much. Right, those people coming in late, please take your seats quietly. At this point in the meeting, we suspect that we are likely to overrun the time allowed in the Constitution, both the 30 minutes allowed for motions and the overall 2.5 hours allowed for the length of the meeting. I therefore would like to move a motion to extend the time by around 10 minutes, so the meeting will end no later than 9 p.m. Can I take that as agreed? Thank you very much. In which case we move to agenda item 12, the golden motion on homelessness and immigration rules. The motion can be found on the website and on modern.gov as part of the agenda, and will also be shown on the screen in the room and hopefully via YouTube as well. Can I please ask Councillor Renard of the Labour Group to move the motion? Councillor Renard, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like others that have already spoken today, this is also my first speech to full council. So very exciting. This motion seeks to give all homeless people the confidence to approach the council services and access the support they need and deserve. The Home Office has recently published guidance that means someone's right to remain in the UK could be cancelled if they become homeless, leading to unjustified, unnecessary and cruel deportations. But it's really important that first we give some context to this motion and remind everyone of our work so far. There's actually an error in the motion. Homelessness is down by 80% since 2019, not 2016, so we've undersold ourselves. The steepest decrease was before the Everyone In scheme, which the Tories will try to attribute it to, forgetting they've now ended the scheme. I'm sure of their speeches will reference it, so I would like to ask them, if it's so successful, why would they end it? Is homelessness only a problem worth addressing during COVID? This achievement reiterates the strength of a one city approach. We couldn't have done this without cooperation from charities and the voluntary sector who came together to help us tackle this issue. Very much an offer and an ask. For example, we worked with Bristol churches through the One City plan to open winter night shelters. We opened Youth Maps, a new service to help prevent youth homelessness. And recently invested in Bristol Street Outreach, a new service to help accelerate the council's work to end rough sleeping in Bristol. But we still need to give everyone at risk of being homeless the confidence to approach the council services provided by the council and its partners. The Home Office guidance does the opposite of that and means that people could face deportation if they seek help for their situation. And it's also clearly incompatible with our status as a city of sanctuary. 24th of July is Bristol's 10-year anniversary as a city of sanctuary, so it would be very appropriate for us to pass this motion today, which is affecting our migrant community. And I'd just like to reiterate that whilst the Home Office guidance is optional, it is important we take a stance to ensure that we're making a clear position about our position to it and support for our communities. The legal team have asked to be added in the subject to circumstance of each individual case, but let me be clear, this guidance is optional, and if it doesn't pass today, this motion, we will choose to action it anyway, and we will not follow the optional guidelines. So I sincerely hope that full council votes for this motion. It will put a stop to an unnecessary, cruel policy and build on the good work we and the city have done to tackle homelessness and rough sleeping. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Renard, and congratulations on your maiden speech. And I call Councillor Rippington of the Labour Group to second the motion. Councillor Rippington, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Hostile environment. These two words send shivers down my spine. The hostile environment aims to cut undocumented migrants off from using fundamental services, including the NHS and the police, and to make it illegal to work or for a landlord to rent them a property. Make no mistake, this latest guidance from the Home Office is a continuation of the hostile environment. It's not only cruel, but illogical. This guidance reflects an inward-looking, backward, hostile government, a government which has already wrongly detained, deported and denied the legal rights of hundreds of members of the Windrush generation. Bristol is renowned for being the opposite of this, for being inclusive, progressive and welcoming. This motion commits us to not following guidance that is completely detached from Bristol's identity. If someone is living in the UK and in need of help, they should be able to access the same support mechanisms as everyone else. I don't think that should be controversial. If you see someone fall in the river, you don't ask their immigration status before you help them to get out, unless you are Nigel Farage or the Home Secretary, possibly.
Discouraging people at risk of homelessness from accessing support does nothing to help tackle homelessness. We need to tackle the cause of the problem, as Labour has been doing in Bristol. We need more support systems, more social housing, and more support for people on low incomes. We also need to be able to approach support services. This motion helps our migrant citizens who are at risk of homelessness. Why would someone with leave to remain reach out for help when doing so could put them on a watch list for possible deportation? This motion is even more important now that the EU settlement scheme deadline has passed. EU migrants will have jumped through hoops to get settled status. Even after all that, if they're unfortunate enough to lose their home, they could still be deported. The EU SS by itself will lead to deportations as people lose their right to live and work in the UK. We haven't yet seen the full scale of this, but we need to ensure that those who are granted leave to remain aren't deported when they fall on tough times. So I very much hope full council votes for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lippington. There's been an amendment to the motion from the Conservative Group, and that was published online this afternoon as a supplement to the agenda. I now ask Councillor Weston of the Conservative Group to move the amendment. Councillor Weston, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Congratulate colleagues on maiden speeches and thoroughly deride some of the comments that were just put out in the last one. When it comes to immigration, the issue is nuance for me. You quite rightly point out in the speech the Home Office advice in December. The Home Office advice in December, in my opinion, was too draconian. And the reason it was so is that the simple fact of being a rough sleeper would be grounds potentially for deportation. Now, that is obviously unfair. If someone has come here for 40 years and they've worked, they've paid into the system, fallen on hard times, that you can then deport them. Clarification was issued on the 15th of April this year that changed that guidance and added nuance. And that nuance is, the rule was amended to clarify that permission may only be refused or cancelled where a person has repeatedly refused suitable offers of support and engaged in persistent antisocial behaviour. Simply being rough sleeping is not grounds for deportation. It also goes on at length talking about case-by-case basis. There is no blanket rule. Now, the proposals in December were too hard. They lacked nuance. Nuance was correctly added because it needed to be added. What our amendment does is put that nuance back in, so that if someone refuses help, if they're engaged in antisocial behaviour, then and only then would we consider referring them on. The motion, as you put it, says you'd only do so with their permission. But in the small minority of cases that I've just described where help is refused, antisocial behaviour is prevalent, they're not going to give that permission. It's adding nuance to the motion. What we're proposing today is not us trying to be mean. It's actually, I think, what our citizens would expect us to do. We look at things on a case-by-case basis. If December's was lacking of nuance, the motion is also lacking nuance. The amendment isn't. So I'm asking you to please vote for the amendment because it's the right thing to do. It balances our fairness to our citizens and those that have contributed, along with also supporting our wider communities that might be being on the detrimental end of antisocial behaviour. It's about nuance. And that's why I propose the amendment, and I hope you will support it. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Courtley to second the amendment.
Okay, yeah, thank you, my Lord Mayor. Second this amendment, reserving my remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, we'll now move to a debate on the amendment, and I call Councillor Bales to speak for the Labour Group. Councillor Bales, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Labour Group will be voting against this amendment. It does nothing but water down the
the motion and tries to justify why a policy of deporting homeless people is apparently somehow necessary. The motion also seeks to have full council note the government provided extra resource to help councils tackle rough sleeping during the pandemic. If they would like us to know how successful the scheme was, why did they end it? If anything, this is showing that not providing funding to help address homelessness is on a national level and is a political choice. If central government can provide the resources to tackle homelessness in 2020, then it shouldn't stop during 2021. After all, the government stated the goal is to end rough sleeping by 2024. So it's time for it to put its money where its mouth is and provide the proper resources to address it. Before the pandemic, 2/3 of councils overspent on homelessness services, a combined 140 million between authorities. Councils are doing their bit with very little funding from the government. It's time for the government to step up and do its bit too. The Everyone In scheme is just as necessary now as it was last year. The amendment spends a lot of time talking about how unlikely it is that anyone will be deported under the government policy, trying to deflect away from the fact that this is still Tory policy to deport someone for rough sleeping. The principle still stands that this would be an immoral thing to do and it is not compatible with who we are as a city. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of homeless migrants. Someone could have lived here almost all of their lives. Bristol would be their home. They would live here, work here, have friends and family here before falling on hard times. Losing your home for whatever reason would be hard enough to take, but then your problems would be compounded by not only losing your home, but your friends and family and country too, and could face deportation to a country you've never really known. So the Labour group will vote against this amendment and will be voting for a policy that has us supporting, not deporting, homeless people.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Bales, and congratulations on making your maiden speech. I now call Councillor Parsons to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Thank you, Councillor Parsons. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking against the amendment and in favour of the original motion. Quite simply, no one should be punished for being homeless. Many people come to Bristol seeking sanctuary from war, persecution, or the impacts of the climate crisis. And we can be proud that Bristol stands in solidarity. Our charitable and voluntary sector organisations work with passion and resolve to create places of safety. But these new immigration rules threaten that safety, and later clarifications from the government have done little to ease concerns. With its talk of enforcement and lawlessness, this amendment betrays a lack of understanding of the realities of rough sleeping. It fatally weakens the motion and reinforces myths about homelessness. People who sleep rough are incredibly vulnerable. They may be fleeing modern slavery or domestic abuse. They may be traumatised, scared, in crisis. Under these new rules, speaking to a caseworker could put people at risk of being deported. This will make already vulnerable people, particularly in the government's own assessment, women and girls, less safe, less able to trust and access the services that are meant to support them, and more at risk of ending up on the streets. Being homeless is not a crime. Sleeping rough is not an excuse to deport someone. Let's reject this amendment and stand in solidarity with everyone who might one day find themselves sleeping on our streets. And then let's get on with the work of ending homelessness for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons, and congratulations on your maiden speech as well. And finally, I'll call Councillor Hartley to speak for the Liberal Democrat Group. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. While the Liberal Democrat Group strongly support the original motion, this amendment removes all of the power from that motion. The motion is designed to foster an attitude of trust and openness between the council, its partners, and rough sleepers of Bristol. The references to unlawful behaviour that this amendment spells out are a severe issue. The 1824 Vagrancy Act, which the Liberal Democrats oppose in its entirety and think needs to be repealed, means that all homeless people, by the pure act of being homeless, are acting in an unlawful way, meaning they would lose the protections this motion offers. The amendment substantially weakens the language the motion offers into building that necessary trust. I would like to welcome the support the central government provided during the pandemic and the excellent work that council officers provided in housing the homeless. We saw how effective a housing first model can be at alleviating the issues around rough sleeping. Housing must be seen as a basic human right, and a home can massively assist people get past other issues that they may have. If rough sleepers fear deportation, they will not reach out for the support that they need to alleviate their problems. Bristol is a proud city of sanctuary, and we must live up to that title. We must change the mindset of how we deal with homelessness from one of lawlessness to one of support. Unfortunately, this amendment does not do that and will discourage people from reaching out when needed and will therefore keep people on the streets. I'd like to encourage all members to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations on a maiden speech. Councillor Weston, as mover of the amendment, would you like to respond to the debate?
Well, I can tell it's going to be a close vote. Whisper in it, I think. I would urge colleagues, I know how it's going to vote today. I know how it's all going to work. Read the guidance of the 15th of April. It talks about the complexities around rough sleeping. It talks about the grounds of which the rules can be applied. And I repeat, rough sleeping alone cannot be used for deportation and should not be used for deportation. If there are other factors at play that on a case-by-case basis might be considered. So I know where it's going to go. I know that the amendment is lost, but I would at least urge you to read that. At the moment, this motion lacks the nuance it needs. I'm sorry, I'm obviously going to be having a problem when it comes out to the substantive. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Renard, as mover of the substantive motion, would you like to respond to the debate on the amendment? Yeah, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As colleagues have raised, the amendment waters down the original motion and what it's trying to achieve. It tries to justify reasons why deporting homeless people that have not committed any serious crimes, like it tries to imply, is necessary. I'm of the view we shouldn't be deporting people who leave to remain in the UK. If they have leave to remain in the UK, then it should be dealt with our services by the justice system if necessary, rather than just being deported. We need to be a city of sanctuary, and we need to take away the hostile environment that has been created over the last 10 years of Tory government. While I'm happy to give credit where it's due and admit the Everyone In scheme was great, it was an excellent policy, where we differ is that I believe supporting the homeless is a moral obligation, regardless of whether we're in a pandemic or not. There were several years before the pandemic, and there's been time afterwards when we could continue to support the homeless community. And yet the Everyone In scheme has been brought to an end. And the buck is now left for local councils to pick up the bill and deal with the fallout. As Councillor Bale said, homelessness services were grossly underfunded before the pandemic. If the policy of supporting them was excellent, hope they can find it in their coffers to bring back a similar policy. After all, they found 22 billion for a track and trace scheme that had no clear impact on containing COVID. I hope that if the amendment falls, the Conservative group will vote for the motion. And it wasn't so long ago that we were hearing of so-called compassionate conservatism. So I hope they follow that mantra and put themselves in the shoes of migrants who may be at risk of homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to vote on the amendment. And because it will be in a recorded named vote, but because in this room we don't have the benefit of the electronic voting system, it will be done by means of a roll call. So names will be read out in alphabetical order. And I would ask you to, when your name is read out, to respond for, against, or abstain.
For those people watching remotely, you may not be able to hear the response from each councillor because not everyone's sat by a microphone, but the votes will be recorded on the screen, which hopefully you can see.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Don Alexander. Councillor Leslie Alexander. Councillor Bales. Councillor Bartle. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bradshaw. Councillor Breckles. Councillor Brown. Councillor Clark. Councillor Classic. Councillor Cole. Councillor Craig. Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer. Councillor Dyer. Councillor Eddy. Councillor Edwards. Councillor English. Councillor Fitzgibbon. Councillor Fitzjohn. Councillor Fodor. Councillor Francis. Councillor Geeta. Councillor Godwin. Councillor Gollop. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Goulandris. Councillor Grant. Councillor Hance. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hathway. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hooker. Councillor Hulme. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kent. Councillor King. Councillor McCarwey. Councillor Massey. Councillor Michelat. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Morris. Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Plowden. Councillor Pulteney. Councillor Courtley. Councillor Renard. Councillor Rippington. Councillor James Scott. Councillor Sharon Scott. Councillor Stafford Townsend. Councillor Stone. Councillor Townsend. Councillor Varney. Councillor Weston. Councillor Windows. Councillor Y. Mayor Rees. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So the result is on the screen. That is 12 votes for, 49 against. So the amendment falls and we move to the debate on the substantive motion, which is unamended. And I call Councillor Mohammed to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed, you have 3 minutes.
I support this motion regarding the deportation of asylum seekers and refugees and cancellation of their leave to remain in the UK. I fled from the country of my birth to avoid death from wars, insecurity, and instability, seeking asylum in the United Kingdom, and I know how the suffering of the refugees and their fear of being returned to their country of origin, by which the person on his residency are revoked. What law is this and where are the human rights and the Geneva Refugee Convention? I support this council's non-cooperation with this government and to give any information regarding the homeless of refugees and asylum seekers so that they are not deported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Mohammed, and again, congratulations on your maiden speech today. I now call Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Councillor Weston, 3 minutes.
Again, I'm sure this will be a close vote. We're going to be abstaining on this. Again, I'm not sure colleagues have read all the guidance. I genuinely have not. You cannot deport someone just because they're rough sleeping. That isn't in the guidance. That's not in the rules. The only time you consider that is on a case-by-case basis if there's persistent ASB, and we know the vast majority of cases there isn't, and if they've declined support. The motion removes that nuance, so we cannot support it. It's worthy, and I understand why it's been brought, but this is not how this kind of issue should be debated. We should be looking at things case by case, so we'll be abstaining, my Lord Mayor. I think an opportunity has been lost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weston. And I call Councillor Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Clark, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The impact of COVID and Brexit have almost coalesced into a perfect storm of employment insecurity, certainly previously not witnessed in my lifetime. So when we see the government have introduced these changes to the immigration rules, it feels harsh beyond words. We see that housing law specialists have criticised a lack of clarity in definition and a broad scope to the rule. And here is the rub. Part 9 sets out the general grounds for refusing or cancelling permission. Some grounds are mandatory, others are at the discretion of a home office caseworker. So just to be clear, the Home Office defines rough sleeping as sleeping in the open air, for example, on the street or other places not designated for habitation, for example, sheds or car parks. Interestingly, the legislation is not clear if the rules apply to someone spending just one night sleeping rough, or if it could apply to somebody who's historically slept rough. The government says the new provision will be used sparingly, where individuals have repeatedly refused support, such as accommodation, and are engaged in persistent antisocial behaviour. In response to the guidance, John Sparks, the chief executive of the homeless charity Crisis, said, "It will put people who are facing homelessness further into onto the fringes of society, rather than engaging them in seeking support. We know that our services, that the people we know through our services that people who have no recourse to public funds because of their immigration status have little or no access to support in the first place and are forced into rough sleeping if they are unable to work." The chief executive of St Mungo's, Steve Douglas, said, "It is disappointing that this is not being discussed with the homelessness sector, where there is a real concern, I know, thank you, that it will increase distrust in the Home Office and could drive people with a legitimate right to remain away from essential services." Before I finish, I just wanted to share with you the thoughts of a 38-year-old immigrant from East Africa, who has been a street homeless for 3 years. He is now facing being rounded up and detained as a result of the new rules. And he says, "I'm not allowed to travel, to work, or to claim benefits. What am I expected to do? The government is making decisions for us. My life is no longer my own." So finally, the Liberal Democrat group will be supporting this motion, and let's hope we join the Greater London Authority and other local authorities who have said they will refuse to cooperate with the Home Office on the new policy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Renard, would you like to respond to the debate as mover of the motion? Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I'd start by sort of challenging nuance. There is a lot of nuance in immigration rules, too much nuance, and it sets up people to fail, struggle to navigate a complex system. And, you know, I think 10 years of Tory rule has made it much worse. We need to be supporting our communities, our migrant communities, and we need to be taking clear stances, not ones full of nuance. where they're, if in this circumstance or in that circumstance, it's a clear position we need. And it's a clear position we'll be taking today as a council. And I'm grateful to obviously colleagues in the Labour group and within the Liberal Democrat and Greens for supporting this motion. There are a lot of challenges ahead. We've got a furlough scheme winding up. We've got a lot of challenges that are coming forward in the coming months. The situation may well get worse before it gets better. So it's important that we're doing what we can to support people. My background is in mental health, and I know that the reasons that people can end up sleeping on the streets are very complex, and they can be, full of mistrust of services as it is, without us compounding the problem by following Home Office guidance. So I'm pleased today we'll be taking a clear stance, and that the majority of us in this room will be voting for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move to the vote on the unamended substantive motion, which again will be carried out by way of a roll call.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Don Alexander. Councillor Leslie Alexander. Councillor Bales. Councillor Bartle. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bradshaw. Councillor Breckles. Councillor Brown. Councillor Clark. Councillor Classic. Councillor Cole. Councillor Craig. Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer. Councillor Dyer. Councillor Edwards. Councillor English. Councillor Fitzgibbon. Councillor Fitzjohn. Councillor Fodor. Councillor Francis. Councillor Geeta. Councillor Godwin. Councillor Gollop. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Goulandris. Councillor Grant. Councillor Hants. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hathway. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hooker. Councillor Hum. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kent. Councillor King. Councillor Makawi. Councillor Massey. Councillor Michelat. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Morris. Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Plowden. Councillor Pulteney. Councillor Quartley. Councillor Renard. Councillor Rippington. Councillor James Scott. Councillor Sharon Scott. Councillor Stafford Townsend. Councillor Stone. Councillor Townsend. Councillor Varney. Councillor Weston. Councillor Windows. Councillor Y. Mayor Rees. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. So the result is on the screen. We have 49 votes for, 12 abstentions and none against. So the motion is carried. We now move on to agenda item 12, the silver motion, which is LGBT plus mental health protection. Once again, this motion has been published with the agenda for this meeting and can be found on the website and should also be displayed on the screen during the proposing speech. So I'll ask Councillor Hartley of the Liberal Democrat Group to move the motion. Councillor Hartley, you have 3 minutes.
Sorry, struggling slightly. Okay, right. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over the last month, we've seen many expressions of pride across our city and the country, from Bristol's first ever Pride crossing on Wine Street to Jordan Henderson's rainbow laces on show at England's victory in Rome. I'm sure many of you will share my sadness that the Bristol Pride Parade, which is due on Saturday, has been postponed because of the pandemic. Overall, treatment of LGBT plus people and their rights has improved by leaps and bounds over the last few decades, but as a community, they still need our help. The current pandemic has shone a light on mental health like never before. As we all know, anyone can experience a mental health problem at any time. Yet for many years, mental health has been a poor relation to physical health. Just because you can't see it doesn't make it any less real or any less debilitating. I'm proud that the Liberal Democrats have long called for parity between physical and mental health, demanding better for patients and healthcare professionals, including increasing investment in mental health to ensure that when you need help, it is there. As I've highlighted within the motion itself, the statistics around LGBT plus mental health are truly shocking, with 61% of participants in a study of the Bristol LGBT plus community having sought help for anxiety or depression, and that 32% of respondents had hurt or injured themselves in an act of self-harm. Within the LGBT plus community itself, the situation is even worse for members of the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community, younger or older people, and transgender people. As a young bisexual myself, and has experienced my own difficulties with both depression and anxiety, I believe this is a particularly acute problem. Issues around homophobia, discrimination, social isolation, and feelings of rejection can compound existing mental health issues to drive people into true suffering. To any members of the LGBT community that are watching this debate today, that are experiencing mental health issues, I would urge you to not suffer in silence, but to reach out. This motion will help to ease that suffering for members of the community in Bristol, whether as council staff, young people in education, or the wider community. By creating a comprehensive strategic plan for dealing with this issue, we can make sure that mental health truly has parity with physical health and make sure that people receive no discrimination in their treatment.
30 seconds left.
It is with hope and great pride that I commend this motion to council and ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hartley, and I call Councillor Craig of the Labour Group to second the motion. Thank you, Councillor Craig. You have
Trust
3
me,
minutes.
it's the last time I'm going to be up here tonight. Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Labour Group is pleased to support this motion, and I thank Councillor Hartley for bringing it to full council. As the Golden Motion was appropriately timed to coincide with the 10-year anniversary of the City of Sanctuary. I'm pleased that we are using the closest full council to Pride Month to discuss important LGBT plus Q issues. Got that wrong. The statistics mentioned in the motion are, of course, of serious cause for concern. We need Bristol to be a safe, welcoming, inclusive place for the LGBT plus community. And while I like to think we lead the way on being progressive and inclusive, work needs to be done, which was also evidenced by the new Pride crossing being vandalized a day after it opened. We also need to ensure that anyone experiencing mental health feels able to talk about it and has access to the appropriate services. This year has been enormously difficult. People have been isolated and unable to see friends and families for long periods of time. The pandemic has undoubtedly had a profound effect on Bristolians' mental health, and we recognise that and will work to ensure that coming out of the pandemic, we need to ensure we have support services in place. Our administration of course treats LGBT plus rights and mental health with the utmost importance, which is why we've become a Time to Change employer, a campaign to end the stigma of mental health. We've launched an equality charter to improve equality, diversity and inclusion across Bristol. We reinstated the staff-led equalities groups in the staff survey and held internal roundtables with staff to address long-standing equality issues. We launched the Thrive Bristol Mental Health and Wellbeing 10-year programme, amongst many other things. But we appreciate that more can be done. And that's why we will be voting for the motion and are always actively looking to improve the well-being of LGBT plus people in Bristol. Our manifesto committed us to work with the NHS, schools, police and other groups to ensure Bristol is a safe space for LGBT plus people, and we will continue to do that. We'll also be commissioning a mayoral equalities report to look into and address LGBT plus discrimination in Bristol and to work with the groups to champion the community's cause and interests. On top of these actions, this motion provides good concrete measures to improve the well-being of our LGBT plus community, so we will be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig. And we'll now hear from speakers on the motion, and I call Councillor Stone to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Thank you, Councillor Stone. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Okay, well, as a member of the LGTB plus, the laughter comes a bit later on, community, I completely endorse this motion. We must first remember that the mental health issues like low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, including social anxiety, eating problems, misusing drugs and alcohol, self-harm, and suicidal feelings will undoubtedly affect every single person in this room. And we would probably go on to say mental health is invisible and does not discriminate. Yes, it is invisible, but I would like to question that it does not discriminate. The statistics clearly show that you are more likely to suffer from mental health issues if you are a member of the LGBT plus community. As a young person growing up in Bristol during the 70s and 80s, I was confused about me, and not having the words to describe how I felt was very frightening. This led to being diagnosed with depression and social anxiety. It turns out I was gay. Now you laugh. I was a statistic that hasn't gone away. We still see that 52% of young LGBT plus people have had thoughts about taking their own life. 13% have actually tried to do this. Almost half of trans people have thoughts about taking their own lives as well. 41% of non-binary people had said that they have harmed themselves in the last year. And 3 in 5 LGBT plus people have said they have experienced social anxiety. I am horrified to read these statistics, and it feels that society just does not get it. My depression, I want you to know, was not caused by me being gay. And that the mental health issues of people in the LGBT plus community suffer from is a despicable indictment of the community at large and their willingness to inflict their homophobic views. It is only right that we support and protect charities such as Mind and Stonewall to create a strategy to help those most affected by these mental health issues. It is also clear that work still needs to be done in education and the like to change the mindset of our fellow citizens to aspire towards a more inclusive society. Only recently, a young person asked me, why is it that when seeking mental health help through mental health services, you cannot register yourself as non-binary? Being able to clearly identify as non-binary can be very helpful for those who are struggling with gender identity. It feels very clear to me that the cis heterosexual community is rather responsible for the mental health of the LGBT plus community. And as we as a progressive council, need to send an apology for this hurt that continues to happen. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Stone. And for, I think, the final time tonight, congratulations on another maiden speech. And I now call Councillor Morris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Councillor Morris, you have 3 minutes.
It feels like I've done something wrong. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The group will be supporting these proposals and thank Councillor Hartley for bringing it at this time. I'm not going to repeat the statistics that we've already heard tonight, but they are very concerning. At last full council, I was appointed as chair of health scrutiny. At every opportunity since, I have asked questions regarding mental health. Having read the drafts of the quality accounts, I can confirm that the mental health agenda is extremely high, and rightly so. I would wish to broaden the debate slightly because there's no hiding from the fact that suicide is the biggest killer of men below the age of 45 in this country. As a father of 4 boys, aged between 12 and 16, this causes me great concern. And not just for my own children, but for, let's be honest, life is hard for young people at the moment. Even before the pandemic, mental health services were under strain, with many of the conditions presented often hidden, difficult to diagnose, and expensive to treat. The COVID pandemic has made many of these problems even more acute, with the impacts of isolation or fear, certainly in the early stages. I know of at least one young man in my own ward who sadly took his life during lockdown. I have witnessed and experienced for myself some of the impacts caused by COVID prevention measures on young people. The Royal College of Psychiatrists have warned that under 18s have suffered the most, with increases in agoraphobia and anxiety due to school closures, disrupted friendships, uncertainty and social isolation. Last year, the NHS saw a 28% rise in children referred for treatment, and they speak of a terrifying level of demand. And we know that there's more. And that is why I welcome the government's recent £500 million mental health recovery action plan, a comprehensive programme which is designed to improve access to talking therapies, support in employment and treatment options. Sarona have done a lot of work in opening up mental health centres more locally. However, much more will need to be done as we emerge from the health crisis, and working closely through schools and making sure all vulnerable people know how and where to find help is a sensible and practical approach to dealing with these problems. I'm not demoting or downgrading the consideration of the LGBT community, but simply drawing attention to the plight that's within the context of the general health challenge. And I would welcome the opportunity to discuss this separately with Councillor Hartley and to see what scrutiny can do to support. We endorse the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hartley, as mover of the motion, would you like to respond to the debate? And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Keeping one eye on the time and the fact we've been here for almost 5 hours, I'll be brief. I'd like to thank Councillor Craig and the Labour Group for seconding the motion, and thank Councillor Stone and the Greens and Councillor Morris and the Conservatives for their speeches and wider support. I would also like to welcome the Mayor's Equality Commission for LGBT plus people that was referenced in Councillor Craig's speech. This motion will be the first step in improving the mental well-being of LGBT plus people, and will help thousands of people across the city and no doubt save lives. If just one more LGBT plus person can receive the support they need, I will see this motion as a success. They are a community that is suffering and they need our help. I hope for your support on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move to the vote on the motion, which will be a straightforward aye, nay vote. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against, say no. Well, that's unanimous. The ayes have it and the motion is carried. That concludes the meeting for this evening. Thank you to all councillors for attending and everyone else who has participated. The next full council will be on Tuesday, the 7th of September. Good night.